Hello and welcome to the 25th Annual Get Lit Festival. I'm Kate Peterson, Director of Get Lit Programs, a nonprofit organization housed within Eastern Washington University. Our program is responsible for Get Lit, Washington State's longest-running annual literary festival, which hosts readings, writing workshops, craft classes, panel discussions, and more, featuring many talented writers from our region and beyond. The festival takes place this Thursday through Sunday, April 20th through 23rd, at many venues across downtown Spokane, and of course here on YouTube as well. We're thrilled that for this year's 25th anniversary festival, we'll have U.S. Poet Laureate Ada Limon as one of our headliners. You can find a full schedule of in-person and virtual events, along with information about all of our festival authors, by visiting our website, getlitfestival.org. Now I'd like to introduce Get Lit's Assistant Coordinator, Liz Graves, who will tell us about today's event.
Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our Regional MFA Reading, an event that has been a Get Lit Festival mainstay for many years. This year, we are celebrating writers from the University of Idaho, Boise State University, Eastern Oregon University, Oregon State University, University of Montana, and Eastern Washington University. The graduate students we will hear from today are all committed to developing their talents as writers in their chosen genres. Today, we will be hearing readings from students studying poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. Each MFA candidate who will be sharing their work will be introduced by a faculty member from their program. We hope you enjoy this chance to hear from our region's rising talents. Now, I'll hand it back over to Kate, who will help us get started with our first reader.
Thank you, Liz. Our first reader is Erin Hedge from our very own Eastern Washington University, who will be introduced by faculty member Natalie Cush. Please welcome Natalie.
Erin Hedge, in his second year of EWU's nonfiction program, never mentioned to me until late in his first year that he was researching several unassigned writing projects alongside the ones for his classes, just because he liked the interviewing. He's a born feature journalist, writing about religion, his family, and environmental issues in the inland Northwest. He has a Master of Science in Environmental Studies from Prescott College and has written for Vox, The Guardian, Black Bear Review, and 2 Medium publications. He wants to write reported essays for popular and literary magazines. If that falls through, he tells me, he'll consider a career as a beachcomber on a South Pacific island. I suspect he'd get voted off that island once he took to pestering the locals for their life stories. Here's Erin.
Thanks, Natalie. Can everybody hear me? Thank you. Thanks for everybody for being here. I'm excited to hear everybody's pieces. This is a short excerpt from the middle of a long reported essay included in my thesis about the supply chain of rattlesnake cures, or snake bite cures, sorry. Right now, it doesn't have a title. I'm just calling it Erin's anti-venom essay. Here it goes. Rattlesnakes and other pit vipers are the raw crude of a global industry of medicines, including not only antivenom, but potential cures for cancer, arthritis, thrombosis, hepatitis, and many other diseases. The global antivenom market is valued at almost $1 billion annually. Most of that industry is above board, shaped by verifiable supply chains involving reputable venom producers. Boston Scientific, the drug manufacturer that makes the leading American snakebite antidote, says publicly that it buys venom only from herpetologists who harvest from captive snake colonies. But such venom producers are a vanishing breed. Wisconsin Public Radio reported in 2021 that there are fewer than a dozen laboratories around the world that produce venom used in the manufacture of antivenom for snake bites and scorpion stings. Boston Scientific buys from only 2 producers to make its widely available but very expensive Crofab antivenom, which some say is a recipe for a supply shortage. 6 people with decades of experience in the venom industry speaking independently told me in 2020 that it wasn't always like this. Until the mid-2010s, much of the venom supply for Crofab was produced in a Wild West atmosphere by Texas snake handlers and bounty hunters from other states in the South. Ken Darnell, a former patent lawyer who left a Washington, D.C. practice in the 1970s to start a snake farm near Gordon, Alabama, told me that between 2000 and 2014, at least 50% of some venoms used to make crowfab came from his home laboratory, where he used to milk eastern diamondback rattlesnakes and still stockpiles the venom of several species, including the western diamondback. During that decade and a half, Darnell's brood of a few hundred snakes wasn't enough to keep up with demand, so he sourced more venom from gruesome fairs called rattlesnake roundups. These events are a waning cultural phenomenon in Texas and other parts of the South, where venomous snakes are piled by the hundreds and sometimes by the thousands in plywood enclosures made to perform circus tricks and sold for meat and parts. At these roundups, snakes are not counted by the individual, but measured by the pound in the same way lumber tycoons think not in trees, but in board feet as a metric of success. The largest ever take was seen in Sweetwater, Texas, 40 miles west of Abilene in 2016, where the event organizers recorded more than 12 tons of rattlesnakes. The average western diamondback rattlesnake weighs around 2 pounds. That pencils out to about 12,000 snakes for the 2016 event, but the exact number of individual snakes is not known. The events are organized by charity groups like local chapters of the Lions and Kiwanis clubs or the Junior Chamber of Commerce. Most roundups don't kill every snake. Instead, after extracting some venom and entertainment from the animals for the roundup attendees, they sell them to several snake merchants. These buyers, literal snake oil salesmen, are the ones that butcher snakes from most roundups. From the corpses, they make various curios you might find at kitschy roadside pit stops: tabletop mounts, snow globes, belts, canes topped with menacing taxidermied rattlesnake heads, and rattle keychains. They also render the meat and organs that you can buy as cuisine at fine Dallas restaurants. Randall Briggs, an aging man in overalls, a baseball hat, and a Phil Robertson beard, operates a rattlesnake shop out of Paris, Texas, and is known as the state's most prominent buyer of rattlesnake from roundups. We buy all the snakes here, he told me at a roundup in February 2020. We take them home, we milk them, and then we start butchering them for the skins and meat. We take every piece of it and try to make it into something. The only thing we actually throw away is the testes. We actually take the fat, cut it out of the snake, and we cure that fat, and it makes an oil that they use for arthritis and different kinds of remedies. The Sweetwater event, which Briggs also buys from, is unique in that its organizers kill every rattlesnake that's brought in. It even features a station where onlookers can buy a ticket to behead a rattlesnake with a machete, string it up on a display, eviscerate it, skin it, and plant their bloody handprints on a plasterboard mural hung over the display for everyone to see. Darnell has a deep love for snakes and finds these activities repulsive. I hate it, can't stand it, he said of the circus stunts and the slicing and dicing of creatures. But when he was selling venom in the crowfab supply chain, he attended roundups as a matter of pragmatism. They were a logical place to harvest and stockpile venom, which he sees as a public good, since venom is used to save people's lives. This conflicts with Boston Scientific's account that it doesn't source venom from roundups. So I reached out to the company's spokesperson, Chris Sampson. He backed up the company's stance that it doesn't buy venom that was harvested at rattlesnake roundups. He said in an email that at BTG International, the part of the company that makes the cure, we produce or acquire all of the venom for the manufacture of crowfab from long-term captive snake colonies. We do not use or buy venom acquired by means of snake roundups. Statements to this effect by the company offend Darnell enough to make him curse. He told me in a phone conversation, people at BTG International can say, we don't know it was sourced from roundups. Well, they didn't ask, and they were damn happy to get the stuff regardless of where it came from because it was top quality. In fact, he got so worked up about the company's public denials that he sued BTG unsuccessfully in 2014 to invalidate the crowfab patent. Darnell was still stewing over this saga in 2020 when he wrote to me about it. Sadly, Darnell complained, I lost, and for reasons that made little sense, unless it is true that the patent office is not above corruption. That's my excerpt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aaron. Our next reader is Libby Croce from the University of Idaho, who will be introduced by faculty member Mike McGriff. Please welcome Mike.
Thanks so much. My name is Mike McGriff. I'm a professor at the University of Idaho, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Libby Croce. Among many things, Libby is a Pittsburgh native, grad of the poetry powerhouse Knox College. She's a third-year poet in our MFA program who has just written an absolutely stellar thesis, and she's a longstanding editor of Fugue magazine. By way of introduction, I've got a few poets who I think who are sort of Libby's ancestors. Milena Morling is like Libby insofar as that she sees the world as a magical place, just waiting for a poem to be ascribed to it. I see Libby writing like Mary Ruefle, looking at the absurdity of life mixed in with this sort of violent disappointment and ecstasy of the everyday. I think of Russell Edson and Libby holding hands in the world of absurdity and tawdry, forbidden sexual corners of the universe. And I think of Tomas Transtromer as being someone who knows through the very plain and very magical, everyday, surreal, abjectly mysterious landscape that is contemporary life. I think nobody I've ever come across as a student has written a poem like Libby, and I really find her work to be undescribable in so many ways. So welcome, Libby.
Well, Mike, thanks so much. I feel no pressure at all to live up to my literary ancestors. Also, thanks for the great introduction, and thanks. I don't know, I just feel lucky that I get to work with you all the time. Yeah, so I'm going to read 4 poems from my thesis, which Mike made it seem like, oh, it's done, like it's over, it's good. No, it's work in progress. But 2 of them are kind of small, 2 of them are less small. This is the first one in the collection. It's called Where the Fuck is the North Star? In the straw lot across from the dried up municipal water park, 4 graham cracker colored pit bulls nibble on each other's ears. Congratulations, I say to their mother. That one has your nose. You must be proud. When did I stop noticing things? I kick a little gravel and my heart hurls its coffee table across my chest. Listen up, pal. You're not going to get your security deposit back if you keep acting this way. You're trashing the place. There are other ways to love the world. Overhead, the moon dissolves with indifference, the world's largest breath mint, a baseball in a tar pit. I spit and run my tongue around my mouth to keep it from rusting over. 2 feet from the train at midnight, I wait for something. What exactly? Suddenly, I'm leaf litter. Little wordless canals go on pumping all this hot juice around my body. In my bed sheets, I'm a small rodent or the indent of what was, imprint of owl in snow. I try to bring the shovel down on a robin whose spine is all but jutting out of its neck, but I can't. When it turns to look at me, its eye, the smallest magnetic compass, I can't tell if it's asking please or don't, or are you a field? This next one is a poem about getting high in the park. It's called Hero's Journey. I could have sworn I was walking through the desert. I feel big enough and tragic enough. I've been kicking sand and wrecking ships for 10 years. You've been texting me to meet you in the bathroom all night. All we do is pee and talk, same as everyone else. I try to unfasten the dark with my teeth, but to no avail. The moon's a tough little button, choked in its hole. Some people can open a beer bottle with their eye socket or do something tricky with their knuckles, but this poem is all I've got to impress you. I thumb the same scar other people have also thumbed and hope my thumb is different. Press hard so you can feel the outline of the whirl, its pulsing currents. My digits are 5 tireless bloodhounds and I'm a bad dog walker. They sniff out the holes in your jeans until you threaten to send me back the way I came. Maybe if I come bearing gifts, unspool a blue raspberry fruit by the foot, drape it over my palms like I'm displaying the pelt of some exotic animal, the underfur of some dreamed up mink, something I could string a bow with. If you just looked, your eyes raked wet with moonlight, long enough for me to drop a mouse at your feet. I empty my pockets of tickets and tokens and special snacks, but the guy at the prize counter says the best he can do is a handful of fruities, not even a sticky hand or a finger trap, something I could offer the space between us. I slide my chips across the table anyway, like someone who should probably just go to bed. The sprinklers come on. We're stoned in the middle of a beach volleyball court. It's 10 p.m. Someone's dad is telling us to keep it down, something very reasonable and fair, but I want to kick him in the face for disrupting this set of fragile conditions. I floss every night, do extra push-ups. Does he really think I'd turn back now? This poem is about the bar game Big Buck Hunter. It's called Mexican Standoff. I'm not pouting and I'm not lying when I say I'd lick the snow melt from her boots. I kiss $2 goodbye over and over. Seems expensive for PBR, but at least the price of Big Buck Hunter remains relatively stable. It all comes down to want. Virtual steam rising off the flanks of these virtual deer, leg busted up, shattering into a million pixels. I break another bill, reach my dew point. I'd be lucky to hit a Cadillac at 100 yards offhand. There's always pressure to hurry the shot. Don't you feel like the speaker of the poem is a little melodramatic, she had said? I choke up on the plastic rifle. Alone at the two-gun platform, everything is hazy pink and purple with little 8-bit stars, the dream sequence, the interlude. Where's the narrative arc? There has to be blood. Every last rib has got to break. Everyone in the bar turns and looks at me like a bunch of raccoons on ketamine. There are no survivors, or there's only one, and it's not me, scrambling up the hill, out of range. Okay, one more. This is about white Christian mom Airbnbs. It's called The Kingdom is Near, and it has a line from Eileen Miles. The kingdom is near. Anything can be a portable sanctuary, like this egg, like the way an assemblage of moths congeal under a barnful of light, like how bison move their big, slow bodies across the darkened prairie. Like, why shouldn't something I have always known be the very best there is? What's the Wi-Fi password? My friend asks me with her perfect mouth. I tell her, except the E's are 3's, I say. Clever. Our host Jessica loves Jesus, the beach, and DIY projects. Jessica's got her eyes on the prize. Here in the basement of her Live, Laugh, Love Airbnb, the assuredness of her waiting glances off me, her certainty in the kingdom's proximity, in the coming. I watch the small golden retriever pee in the yard like an angel. Steam rises to show that a sacrament is taking place. Something is undergoing a change in states. Most of the time, I pee indifferently. Sometimes I pee with love. Inside, everything is white and taupe and generally flavorless. There are puzzles and magazines to pass the time. My knuckle brushes the ring on my friend's finger. There is movement even the body's most sensitive instruments can't detect. A little voice throbbing here over and over again. Consider driving down the highway. The mountains just seem to move slower than the telephone poles. In the book I give my friend, he reaches his fingers underneath his beloved as she pisses into the chamber pot, then lifts them to his mouth. Eternal stream of the present tense. I think that was Simone Weil. I want my friend to spend all day with me in her mouth like a schoolboy with a jawbreaker. Write a review for Jessica, the email commands. Nearness is relative, 5 stars, very clean. Dog is an angel. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Libby. That was great. Next, we hear from Jonas Myers from Oregon State, who will be introduced by faculty member Cynthia Banu, who is actually one of our festival authors this year. So if you're joining us in person, make sure to check the schedule for Cynthia's events, including the craft class that she'll be teaching. Please welcome Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Banu from Oregon State. I'm so delighted to be introducing Jonas Myers, one of our second-year fiction students here. Jonas describes himself as a musician, writer, teacher, bicycle wanderer, and proud lifelong Cascadian. He studied creative writing at Whitman College, and he came to us from his hometown of Seattle, where he spent most of his 20s working as a jazz pianist and singer-songwriter. Not so long ago, I had the chance to hear him play as part of an OSU music series. The hall was packed, and from the second floor, there was this older woman crouched on the floor of the balcony, transfixed by the way Jonas's fingers were moving across the piano. It wasn't just a performance. He made the music tell a story of its own. And this year, I've had the pleasure of reading his creative work. He's a brave, inventive writer interested in place, history, and climate, and I can't wait for you to hear his work.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Cynthia, and thank you, everyone. It's really wonderful to be a part of this. This is a a piece of flash fiction titled Flash Flood. Shep Clemens, 52, has $324 cash in his back pocket and a smile full of yellow teeth. He's driving Central Texas back roads through a tropical storm, headed home from a gig. The wipers on his pickup whip back and forth, flinging aside the drops pelting the windshield. But the radio's on, and the signal is clear enough that Shep can sing along with Charlie Pride. Kiss an angel good morning, and love her like the devil when you get back home. Tonight's gig was the best in years. He had a hunch it might be, something promising about this new bookstore in Fredericksburg with the cafe and back. All week, the radio has been warning about the storm, and Shep worried it would keep people home, but the sky lightened up some in the afternoon, and 35 people came out for the show, which was plenty to fill the cozy room. Best of all, they listened. Shep's songs are more like poems and stories than catchy tunes, the guitar parts being texture as much as harmony. They don't work so well in a rowdy bar, but when people's eyes and ears are on him, something happens. He becomes the troubadour vagabond his songs portray. He believes it himself. Charlie's last note fades, and a new song comes on, one Shep doesn't recognize, though he likes the beat of it, and he starts tap-tap to tapping along with his right index finger on the dusty, peeling guitar case strapped into the passenger seat. The case shelters his 1977 Guild D20, a mahogany dreadnought with a seasoned sound. It's one of only 2 possessions Shep's hung onto since he left Moose Jaw back in '81. The other is an antique folding picture frame, 2 panels connected by a brass hinge, which also lives inside the guitar case in the same compartment where he keeps his picks and spare strings. He steals a look at himself in the rear view. Lately, for the first time, he can remember he's been liking what he sees. The sweat-stained flat cap and the feral curls, the woolly beard, the pocked and cratered cheeks, those whispery lines branching out from the corners of his eyes. He looks like a man who might have some time-worn wisdom to share. All 35 people stood up after his last song, practically demanding an encore, so he played them Hobo's Lullaby. Then he sat down with an amber ale, and one by one, folks from the crowd came up to thank him. A few were friends, Gina, Carl, Gil, and a few others he recognized as open mic night regulars at the Lost Creek Tavern. Most, though, were strangers. He got 14 new sign-ups for his email list and sold 8 CDs. It was near 10 o'clock by the time everyone cleared out. The owner, Paul Donnelly, a towering silver-haired man with Robert Redford eyes, gave Shep's hand a painful squeeze and pumped it up and down. "Fantastic," he said. "We'd love to have you again." They walked to the back door, and Paul pushed it open to a big wet gust. "Really picking up, isn't it?" said Paul. "You got far to go?" "Just a few miles," said Shep, already feeling the warmth of the wood stove in his International Harvester, tasting the bourbon he'll mix with an ice cube and a splash of maraschino juice. "All right, now, be careful." Shep's alert. The wind keeps trying to shove him into the brush. He's riding the center line, which you more or less have to do anyway on these hill country roads with numbers for names all cracking at the edges, gnarled mountain cedars encroaching from either side. Just over a mile from home, he sees the water on the road and stops at its edge. He's been splashing through puddles and rills since he left the highway, but here, in the lowest dip yet, the water covers a good long stretch, maybe 40 feet, and it's moving, left to right, north to south, headed for the flood stage Pedernales. He can't be sure how deep it is, but the pickup has good clearance and new tires, and if he turns around and goes back to the highway, it'll mean 40 extra minutes. It's almost 11 and he's bone tired. So he goes for it. His instinct says, not so fast you'll lose control, but don't lose momentum either. The tires slice through the stream and he can already feel vibrating up through the chassis, the force of the water rushing against the wheels. It's deeper than he hoped. Nearly halfway across, he starts to lose his nerve. His foot comes off the gas. but the other side is right there if he can just push through. The road dips again. He won't make it. He throws the truck in reverse and guns it, and that's when the engine stalls out. Shep Clemens is stuck, and the water seems to be rising. Flash flood, he says aloud. There's poetry in it. He'll have to use it in a lyric. How high does the water have to get before it carries the whole truck away? Or will it just come up into the cab and drown him? He should get up onto the roof, maybe, wait it out. First, though, he clicks free the passenger side seatbelt and opens a guitar case. He slips his hand into the compartment behind the instrument's neck and removes the hinged frames, then shuts the guitar away again. It's been years since he worked the hinge, years since any light at all has touched these photographs. To look at them was too much. It was better just to have them nearby. He doesn't like that they've been living in darkness, but then at least they're pressed together. He opens them now. On the left panel, there's Shep, 28, in a baggy brown suit, and Anna, 26, dazzling in her satin gown. Their cheeks touch. Shep's clean-shaven in the photo, sporting the big wire frames everyone wore at the time. Anna's chestnut hair shines. The other photo is of Penny in her high chair, eyes ripe with wonder, chocolate frosting smeared across her face. Her first birthday, her only birthday. Shep brings the glass, that face, slowly to his lips. Then he closes the frame and buttons it into his breast pocket. The force of the water is pinning the driver's door closed, so he opens the passenger side. He'll try for the roof, and failing that, maybe he can swim across. The water is quick, but it's not far to where the road climbs out of it. If he can just grab onto a shrub, he can pull himself across maybe, branch by branch, walk home, warm up, get some sleep, and come back tomorrow for the truck if it doesn't get swept away. It doesn't. Clyde Fenman, deputy sheriff, is the one who finds it there in the morning. He recognizes it, knows it belongs to the Canadian fellow who lives on that old school bus on Irma Howard's ranch. The passenger door is open, and the guitar, which Clyde lifts out of its case and strums a couple times, is a bit out of tune, but undamaged. 2 weeks later, and 5 miles away, a ranch hand finds what's left of the body, which is only what the buzzards didn't want. It's clinging to a mountain cedar, not 100 yards from the banks of the lazy Pedernales.
Thank you, Jonas. Next, we have Daisy Rosenstock from Boise State University. Daisy will be introduced by faculty member Mary Lowry. Please welcome Mary.
Hi there. It's a joy to get to introduce Daisy Rosenstock. Daisy is a second-year poet in our MFA program, and she's also a natural storyteller. Her passion for language is infectious, and as a reader, she's refreshingly omnivorous. She reads language poets and Booker Prize-winning novelists and Stephen King, and I think her wide and varied reading taste influences her own work in wonderful and unexpected ways. She's working on a very poetic and riveting horror novel, and her poems are full of powerful imagery and haunting gardens and dreamscapes. Her work has flashes of both beauty and horror and an ever-present awareness of mortality. She juxtaposes unexpected things like 80s rock bands and the Bible in ways that are really revelatory. My literary community and my life are so much better for having Daisy in them, and I'm so excited that we get to hear her work today.
Just a caveat, my camera was doing something kind of goofy a couple seconds ago, so if it starts acting up, somebody just shout at me. Thank you so much, Mary. It's such a privilege to be introduced by you, and I feel very honored to be a part of this Get Lit Festival. I have 6 poems to read today, which sounds like a lot, but I promise it's not. And I will begin with The Dreamscape. The dreamscape is a flatland, but it is also a mountain. Of course, these two things cannot exist in the same space. But of course, we are no longer dwelling in a space that is sane, nor benevolent, nor safe. The dreamscape is a bog, heavy and slick between a pair of legs, but this should not deter. In fact, it should invigorate. The dreamscape is a persimmon. Cut it open and you will see the future. God is a dog, and this is after Inger Christensen's poem on death. Go walking in sleep, beneath layers of down, go walking, around the edge of the garden, follow little dog and go walking. In the face of this garden, just animals, but then dog goes on far ahead, touching each stone to the shed at the edge of the yard. Exile cannot follow. In the mouth of the shed stands that small body, looks over shoulder, eyes flat glass, and leaves, flies away. And within the walls of the garden, tulips begin to die. Muck baby. She sees the baby through clean sheets, a dream of daughter, a vision in Eve. Within the garden again, watching the irises, a praying mantis swollen with milk crawls up one stalk. Daughter plucks at it, peeling its body from the flower, 4 tiny ribs like a plastic bag in a tree, an incredible yellow tree. New to the neighborhood, she realizes daughter as moth, dressed as a young deer in the tub, creamed soap going cold in the dish. Genesis, the band. In the beginning, Dad mowed the lawn and tilled the garden, and the fire pit was without shape and smoldering, and dew was upon the handles of the wheelbarrow. And when Saturday afternoon came at last, he returned from the fire, red-faced and sweating, and he said, "Come and see." And so I went and I saw. Dad said that the irises needed to go this year, and we separated root from earth. Dad called the work good, and I deemed it sad. And the dirt was replaced, and the dirt was smoothed, and damn it, it was so. Epitaph. Under the deck, half soft, rotten, gone, a gray cat nurses thousands of kittens. None of them will come to me. I threw the voodoo doll I had tried to drown where the deck should have been. It was possessed, and I thought the cats could deal with it. Old house's backyard in the night with 2 old friends. We crawled around on the ground around the fire hydrant searching for sounds. A second shed full of dress-up clothes. I started to sweat, wearing too many layers. The plastic picnic table was hot. Dogs were sniffing around and laying on the concrete walkway. Play-Doh was falling out of our mouths. Molded it back together into perfect spheres. On the last day of school, the kitchen morphs into a bar, live band, ceiling tall. I'm swaying and someone's talking to someone else and they're grinning, telling a good story about us. I drop my food on my feet, wondering to myself, forgetting what about. And orbit. The next evening I wake, still in mourning under that afternoon's thumb. We are strange creatures, you said, like Robert Grenier's cicada. A wine in the late summer, blue and bright, a hollow skin crushed underfoot. Here, yet very much there. Spring springs underneath the down comforter, the hyacinths trying to grow out of a right temple. Everyone, your attention, please. Thank you so much for coming, but my funeral was actually yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daisy. Our next reader is Christopher Densmore from Eastern Oregon University, who will be introduced by faculty member Nick Neely. Please welcome Nick.
Thank you, Kate. I'm Nick, a representative of Eastern Oregon University and its low residency MFA program. It's my pleasure to introduce Christopher Densmore. Christopher is a second-year nonfiction candidate in our program, which has a special concentration in landscape ecology and community. And Christopher well embodies this nexus. His writing is marked by an attention to and empathy for the ecological world, an exploration of our spiritual connections to and through it, and the ways in which these understandings are both personally grounding and essential for communities and our society. In a recent essay, Christopher meditated on the self-immolation of a climate activist on the steps of the Supreme Court, alongside the increasing trend of megafires in the West, a radical but also natural association that typifies his often very lyrical nonfiction. Christopher has a BA from Carleton College. He's the current editor of our student literary magazine, Oregon East, and is also the recipient of our program's Thomas Madden Scholarship and an EOU Fish Trap Teaching Fellowship. He's received support additionally from the Fish Trap Gathering of Writers and the Bread Loaf Environmental Writing Conference. He's working on a collection of essays on ecological grief and lives, and he lives in Missoula, Montana. It's an honor to have Christopher as a student. He has pushed me and all of us in the program with his many heady, sensitive, and playful insights, and we're thrilled to introduce him and his writing to you.
Oh, thanks, Nick. That was really sweet. Hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. So nice to hear y'all's voices. This is an essay about my mom, essentially, and blueberries and losing her to dementia over the past several years gradually. So I'll take it away. On the importance of blueberries. I could tell you a story in which the blueberry juice flows like blood down her joyful cheeks. In that story, we fill our hearts with fruit, picking the little jewels on a sunlit New England hillside. We might even be walking on the mountain that burned last year, just a mother and a son enjoying the summer heat, delighting in earthly bounty. In that story, perhaps the pitch pines burned by the fire are regenerating already. Perhaps new seeds from their serotinous cones, released only with sufficiently scorching temperatures, sprout apple green in the face of devastation. In that story, my mother's mind is light, clear, articulate, precise. In that story, she seems lucid. She has all the skill in trading with the land of a lifetime of gardening. Perhaps in that story, some second growth lushness, some successional reemergence sprouts in the folds of her gray matter. Perhaps she, like the forest, is renewed by the blaze that burns her old growth. In that story, ecological healing happens in her mind. In that story, our togetherness might feel like a moment from Robert McCloskey's classic children's book, Blueberries for Sal. A bear and her cub and a mother and her daughter go berry picking in the hills. The errant children, fond of the fruits beyond measure, eyes to the grounded shrubs, lose track of their mothers. Child and cub are shocked when their eyes upturn to unfamiliar faces, when the mother before them meets their gaze with fear and confusion. But in that story, family is resurgence. The cub finds his sow, the child finds her mother's skirt ripe for tugging, loved ones reunite. The mother and her child return to their kitchen and make blueberry jam for winter. They are young and full of memories. But that is not this story. In the last several years, my mother has developed a nearly obsessive fondness for blueberries. There are several bags or cartons of them, fresh, frozen, and frankly, sometimes rotting, in our freezer and fridge at all times, it seems. Blueberries, 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 she exclaims every morning with the ritual granola and yogurt. She has loved them with particular ardor in these years of her decline, for their antioxidants perhaps, or maybe just for their red leaves in autumn or their bee-teasing white bells in spring. Perhaps because they grow in disturbed places, harsh soils, after fires. But nowadays, we cannot hike to those low bush patches where they grow wild in the thin acidic soils of pine cobble. Her balance has waned. If she went alone, she might get lost. Days later, the Berkshire eagle might report her body among the bushes and the pitch pines. Indeed, the blueberries on pine cobble did survive the fire last year, so they are up there. I can't remember though if we ever picked them up there specifically when I was younger. I suppose it might have been adjacent to a hike on my 10th birthday, but never the project per se. I hope we did though, and I wish we could again. What we can do now is plant some bushes in the garden for her, the garden she can't really tend herself any longer. Imagine them now, 3 plump prostate shrubs, fruiting by July, between the flower plots and the snag of the old crabapple tree, it too now sending up resilient shoots, defying gravity after we cut it down. When she was young and able, I would sometimes help my mom in the garden, often reluctantly. As an adolescent, I was delegated the expansion of the borders of the flower gardens. She was grateful for my sweat, tired from working long days in other people's gardens. After several years, the dirt underneath her fingernails was near permanent. Her knuckles were knobbed, the size of nickels. A picture of her, sun hat above a roasted nose, hands protesting on hips, eyebrows raised suspiciously toward the photographer, my always errant dad, lingers to this day on my fridge. My mother, Betsy the gardener. She has always been a tenacious person, a taskmaster with an exacting sense of how every project ought to be accomplished. Whether chopping onions or peeling potatoes or grinding spices was my task in the kitchen as a kid, she would always correct any variations from her exact and sometimes unstated specifications. When I expanded the garden beds as a teen, she frequently surveyed my work, scrutinizing each bend in the bean-like shape I was digging out of the lawn. Expressions of this tenacity, this will to control, have been particularly painful to watch as she grates against her losses in agency, as she struggles to understand her own predicament, as her eyes wonder at color and shapes I cannot see, as her hands tremble to buckle the seatbelt. What I want you to understand is that when I tried to plant blueberry bushes for my mom, she wanted to control the process even though she couldn't keep track of what day we had planned to go visit the nursery. Even though she couldn't decide which of the 3 roughly similar bushes ought to go at each point in their triangle of the blues, or where that little temple of sweetness ought to land in the yard. Eventually, my dad planted them for her in my stead. Once they were in the ground, I shaped 3 mulch beds around them. She was outraged at the inorganic red dye. Color matters a lot to her these days, and the mulch with its faux cedar hue felt too domestic to her, too suburban. My mom has never been a backcountry explorer or a wilderness pilgrim, but as the gardens grow brambly and wild in these years of limited care, she seems to appreciate the exuberant unruliness. I'm challenged sometimes to identify the preferred line between the wild and the garden, between too much intervention or too little, and apparently dyed mulch was a problem. I water the bushes daily the summer that I returned to live at my parents' house. The first rains wash away the offensive color. Little grass blades perk up around the edges. The shrubs will require fencing if we actually intend to eat any of the berries before the birds, the squirrels, the deer, or even that bear who drops by when the winter breaks and spring melts onto the scene, traipsing our gardens in search of trash and fruit. Trash and fruit, the ingredients of a well-made life. Sometimes chickadees come now to graze on the shrubs. The hippocampus, or memory center of the chickadee's brain, grows larger in the winter in times of scarce food, the better to remember every seed storage vault and berry bush. In summer's wild abundance, the chickadees need little memory for managerial geolocating. When they land on the bushes, my mother smiles from the porch, a lightly euphoric gaze easing into her wide eyes. I'm not sure it matters to her whether we actually enjoy the blueberries. What matters is that they're there, that she can still say the word, that she can appreciate the contrast between the dusty purple berries and the cheerful malachite-esque green leaves. What matters is that the summer is kind to her skin. I don't know how this will end, but there is still some sweetness here. Thanks.
Thank you, Christopher. Now we will hear from Grace Butler from the University of Montana. Grace will be introduced by Emily Reskovich, who is actually one of Get Lit's headlining authors in 2017. Please welcome Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Reskovich. So happy to be here. It's my great privilege to introduce one of the most talented writers I've had the opportunity of working with, Grace Butler. Grace comes from Waterbury Center, Vermont, and before earning her MFA at the University of Montana, she spent several years living in the North Cascade Mountains of Washington. She holds a BFA in Environmental Humanities from Whitman College, where she was a Sherwood Scholar and Semester in the West student. She is currently working on her first novel, which is set in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom. I've had the great pleasure of reading several of Grace's stories and getting to know her as a person. Her fiction, as well as her general demeanor, are the embodiment of her name. She writes with grace, with honesty, and with courage. Her characters are immediately alive and so unbelievably real in just a few sentences. Having grown up raising cattle and living in rural America for years, she is intimately acquainted with the natural world and all of its devastations, its enchantments, and its people. In the stories I've read by Grace, a Buddhist monk gets his robes dirty trying to free a cow from the thick mud. A young man falls off a ladder to his death and soon thereafter fathers a child. And in the beautiful flash piece she will read for you today, an apple picker becomes acquainted with a rural doula who works in a nude cafe. Everything in her stories is imaginative and strange and so very real, so very much like Grace herself. She's a beautiful person, kind-hearted, hardworking, genuine, and brilliant. This summer, she will return home to her family's farm to write. She will haul a desk into a pig pen and do all of her work there at the heart of her farm in the lush shade of an ancient apple tree. She is a natural fiction writer who has made storytelling the great love and pursuit of her life. Working with her has been such an honor, and I'm excited for you to hear her fiction now.
Emily, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Thank you all for having me. I'm really grateful to be here. This piece is called If You Need a Place. There is something clean about leaving a town in the morning, telling no one, and being on my way. I've been sleeping at this dusty crossroads for the better part of 3 months, and now apple picking is finishing up. The last few nights I've been cold in my little tin can sedan. It's been safe though, parked and sleeping in this yellow field where the town has dumped its old cars, its rusted tillers, balers, and swathers. All of it's falling apart, and it's my camouflage. No cop has come in the night to knock on my window, look over me while trying to guess what my body is like under my sleeping coats. And there's a little trailer across the way that has coffee. It's one of the topless ones where a woman stands in the cold, waiting for a stranger to pull up and study her tattoos while she asks if he wants room for cream. I walk over when Georgia opens it first thing. I look her in her eye, and I try to know the shape of her just from the edges of my vision. And she tells me about her trips to the big reservoir up north. I promised myself I wouldn't tell her that I'm leaving. She might hug me through the window, and I don't think I could bear it, her skin on my thick coat. I wasn't able to skirt out of here in the dark like I hoped. I fell asleep with my dome light on, writing plans for going to a cannery this winter. The sedan needed a jump, and I knew I'd have to wait for daylight. In time, at a dirt pullout beside the crossroad, there was a man standing beside a truck. He was staring up the road with his feet wide apart. His hands were behind his back, at ease, like he had a military father too. And I got closer, and the man was a tall woman in work pants and a soiled vest. She had her hair tucked into a hat and a headlamp cinched down tight over it all. I made my voice soft and I said, "Hey." And the woman had those eyes that are so blue it hurts to look at them. I feel rude talking to people like that, with eyes like that. "I was here for apple season, and my car needs a jump. Could ya?" I asked. She looked pained and looked at her watch. "I've got a woman coming down the valley who's about to give birth," she said. She realized she wasn't being clear, that I hadn't been in town long enough to know who she was. "I'm a doula," she said. "I ride with couples up and over the pass to the hospital, in case they don't make it to the hospital." "The headlamp?" I asked. "To see in dark places," she said, and she finally smiled, and then she looked at her watch again. "I'm just worried. This is her second born. They tend to come out faster," she said. "But her husband's bringing her down from way up Slate Creek. Where's your car?" The doula pulled her truck up nose to nose with my sedan, and she looked over my nest in the back seat in the same way that I look over George's body. She pretended not to be looking, but I knew she was, and she knew that I knew. "So people are still having babies in towns like this?" I asked. She dug in her truck for cables, and her voice was harsh. "How old are you anyways?" 28, I said. "I would have guessed older," she said, handing me the cables. I laughed, and she liked me better for laughing, and I liked her better for saying what she said. People are having kids everywhere all the time, she said. Well, what do you do with them here? Your 2 stores are boarded up and the air is nearly always full of smoke, I said. I wanted her to give me more shit, to get riled up. But instead she just said, you know, I do this job because kids will always keep being born. People will keep having them after the world ends, and those kids will not know any different, just like we don't. She shut me up and she knew it. She got close to me as she lifted my hood, and she smelled like gasoline and leather work gloves. Hook it up, she said. And she started her engine, and I waited, then turned my key. My engine sputtered for a few moments and finally came back. Leave it running, she said. I walked with her back to the pullout. She stared north again and looked at her watch. And the day was getting lighter. The green edge of the sky had ebbed into a thin line above the mountains. I looked at her profile. She had these deep lines stretching from the corner of her eye. The ridge of her nose was perfectly straight, and I wanted to pull my finger down it, and so I kept my hands in my pockets. Have you ever delivered a baby in a car? I have, she said. It was wet. Did you have to pull it out of her? No, you don't ever really pull, she said. I just caught the girl. I wiped her off a little and held her because her mother passed out, which I've never seen since. And she was talking with her hands now, and she said, have you ever held a newborn? They have this smell that's so sweet, and you can just feel how new they are. They're more resilient, less fragile than you'd think. And I just looked at her, and she reached out and gripped onto my shoulder. You have a home to go to? She asked. My town is a Dollar Tree and a hydroelectric dam, I said. And you know that's not what I'm asking, she said, if you need a place. I appreciate it, I said, and she knew not to ask more. Rather, she kept talking, saying, I always knew I wanted a job where I could touch people, touch my work. When I was young, I hitched through Italy, and I stayed in this ancient stable where an old man fed me. And everything he made, I've never had anything like it again. He told me that the reason food tasted like shit now was because no one ever really touches it anymore. He said that even now when hands are put on food, they're gloved. Nobody touches anything anymore. That's what he said. And she laid her arm across my shoulders, and she was old enough to be my mother, but she was nothing like my mother. He made fish one evening, she said, a fish he had caught and brought to me while it gasped. I understood his Italian enough to know that he told me to hold it like a lover who was leaving. And I did. It was all tight strength under its scales, but it didn't thrash. I held onto it firm, and he drove a spike through its brain, and I felt the tension leave it. And I held it while he slit its belly open and pulled its insides out into the daylight in a single scoop of his hand. I have never had a better meal. She turned to me and, without any self-consciousness, said, I hope all that made sense. It makes sense in my head. And her ride was coming down the road. She got squarely in front of me, and I tried hard to hold her blue eyes in mine. Her thumbs were on my temples, her fingers wrapped around the sides of my head to the back of my skull, and she held me hard. And her thumbs rubbed against my skin, and she said, if you need a place. And I said, okay. And her arms went around me, and she pressed me into her oily vest, and I felt every stiffness from sleeping in my car, from 3 months of picking work, leave me. Every touch of hers seemed to be so sure, so firm in its intent. I was lost in her. An old Ford pulled up beside us, and the doula grabbed a bag she had ready and opened the passenger doors. A young woman filled the back seat. She was silent, her head tilted back as if she was looking for the sky through the truck roof. There was no room in her world for anything other than her swollen body. The doula reached in and held her hand. She said something to the man driving the truck, and he nodded his thin white face. She climbed into the back seat and shut the door. The man pulled closed the front door. He looked scared, and his tires chirped on the pavement. She had not given me her name. They turned west, heading for the hospital over the pass. So now here I am, standing, and the sun is hitting the hills across this wide valley, and something about her is still here, but she's left me. And these two feelings are making me empty, and I want to eat. I could wait for her. I could easily find out who she is. I could. But I'm going to walk over to Georgia in her little coffee stand, and I'm going to tell her that I'm leaving. And she will look at me and she will say, oh, honey, where are you going? And I'll lie and tell her whichever state name comes to mind first. And she will be sweet and she will give me free coffee for the road, and it'll be burnt, and I will love Georgia even more for that. And I will hug her if she reaches for me, and I will let her hug me in her string bikini bottoms and her silver high heels. And then I will go back into the world of long roads and new work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Grace. Our final reader is Kelly Strain from Eastern Washington University, who will be introduced by Natalie Cush. Please welcome back, Natalie.
Kelly Strain will receive her MFA in nonfiction this spring from Eastern Washington University. Kelly's particular gift is to achieve what writers call distance from an experience she is in the middle of, enough distance that she can write about it with both insight and objectivity. She is originally from Spokane, has moved away several times, but keeps being pulled back. In the past, Kelly has dabbled in teaching, caregiving, and flight attending. About herself, Kelly says that currently her writing focuses on family, grief, and other general wonderings about the world. She says that when she is not writing, she enjoys spinning yarns of a different kind with her crochet hooks and knitting needles. As her thesis advisor, I can report that her literary work does not rely on such terrible puns. Kelly.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm excited to be here. I'm going to read part of an essay that is part of my thesis work. This is called How to Sort Things Out After Your Parents Have Died. Some days you will purposely set time aside, plan to go through a certain room or cupboard. You will be prepared with a plastic storage bin for items to keep, a bag for garbage, though you might be certain nothing your parents left behind is garbage, and either a bag or a box for items to give away. On one of these days, you might choose to start in the bathroom. It is the smallest room in the house, and you are told it won't feel so overwhelming. Start by tossing his old toothbrush and razors. Even though they belonged to your dad, they are easily identified as disposable. You can stop here, but if you still have energy, hang up the paisley print shower curtain you bought at the secondhand store. Of course, this means you will need to take down the rubber duck themed curtain your mom picked out. The visual impact of a new shower curtain in such a small room will feel new, fresh, and possibly wrong. Thinking about taking over the space might feel like you are evicting your parents or being an overbearing house guest. You are not. You are the one who, now that your parents are gone, is left to take up this space. You are a human who is making the place your home. Stop there for now. Yes, there are still tchotchkes on the shelves and wall hangings to take care of. They can stay where they are for now. Your favorite podcast has released a new episode, and besides, you may want to keep the framed poster of the bathing elephant, since the shades of gray, pink, and teal match your new shower curtain. People in the outside world may try to show support by asking, have you gone through their things yet? What are you doing with their stuff? Are you making the place your own? Feel free to answer with no or nothing, and remind them that you changed the shower curtain. Other days, things may happen more spontaneously, organically, when you open the cupboard to put the clean dishes away and finally get tired of your mom's Valentine's Day tray falling out. When this happens, you can grab a bag from nearby and fill it with the kitchen items you know you will never use. The as seen on TV vegetable slicer, the gadget that turns onions into flowers, and the single cup coffee maker. For you, 1 cup of coffee is never enough. It is totally acceptable to skip over the cupboard that holds your mom's cake pans, the ones she used to bake your birthday cakes when you were growing up. There will be time for that later. Like a sprint, use the energy while you have it. When you stop to breathe, put the full bags near the door so they're ready to go when you can take them, whenever that may be. It is not necessary to get rid of every item that belonged to them. You are not erasing them from the space. Do not get rid of your dad's tools. However, you can put them back in the tool bag so they aren't just scattered around. Tuck the bag into the cupboard next to the washing machine. That way it's handy if you need a hammer or a screwdriver, but it isn't a reminder every time you walk by. There will be times, maybe most times, when you have no energy. This is a good point to sit at the dining room table, a perfect spot to observe the living room. Imagine the furniture and different arrangements, the way your mom used to. Feel free to get a tape measure and measure to see where the couch will fit. You might even pull the couch away from the wall, but you might also decide you don't have energy to do much of anything. Instead of performing physical labor, make mental notes about things that can be moved out later, or daydream about paint colors. Eventually, you will run out of neutral items, the ones that are easiest to make decisions about, and will start to focus on items that feel more closely attached to your parents. At this point, the cupboard where you keep medications may be a good place to continue. There may be old paperwork or expired prescriptions tucked in the back that all create the timeline of the last 4 years. Let them be reminders of all the ways you attempted to help, appointments you attended, questions you asked, symptoms you insisted get treated to keep them as close to the original versions of themselves as you could. These artifacts are not ammunition to be inserted into your inner dialogue as proof of failure. Put the medication bottles out and make a pile to be returned to the pharmacy for disposal. It is okay if the bottles sit on the kitchen counter for weeks or even months. It may be difficult to let go of things that have their names on them. At some point, you'll get around to taking your dad's clothes out of the closet. Fold them neatly and put them in garbage bags. Remind yourself you are not throwing the clothes away. Garbage bags are just containers you can use to carry them. Place the bags in a line with the bags full of kitchen stuff. If the dogs start to act worried or nervous, let them sniff the bags and tell them you miss him too. It is okay to dig through a few days later to pull out a couple of his favorite plaid flannel shirts, just to hang in the closet next to your mom's dresses. Inevitably, you will start to feel worn out after taking so much action. When this happens, pull out your favorite blanket, sit on the couch, and watch Joan Didion, The Center Will Not Hold on Netflix. You may feel validated when you hear her nephew tell the story about how Joan stood in her husband's closet, preparing to clean it out after he died, and asked, "But what if he comes back?" This is a scene you may not have related to so closely a few years ago, but it makes perfect sense to you now. Let yourself feel the wonder of finding buried treasure, like the compression socks your mom refused to wear, hidden in a box tucked into the closet. Wonder is a nice contrast to the frustration you used to feel when she would hide things. The spoons she collected in the dresser drawer, the notes she wrote years ago to remind herself of a hair appointment. That is the handwriting that raised your suspicion that Santa wasn't real. The pictures of the 50s themed dance they dressed up for, her poodle skirt and his leather jacket, leaning over the table to share a milkshake with 2 straws. Note that your mom's signature pose, leaning in, chin up, wrist cocked, pinky out, was the same even back in the 80s. Remember the scene from Back to the Future where people slowly disappear from photos, the color draining out like a Polaroid in reverse. Be grateful that doesn't really happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And wow, just what powerful readings today. Thank you to all of our readers and to the faculty members for those thoughtful introductions. It was really great to be able to get to know everybody a little bit more through those intros, and of course to hear all the beautiful work that you all shared with us today. This is always one of my favorite events because it's so fun to be able to get to hear from such a group of talented writers who are all working so hard towards that same goal. So best of luck to all of you on your thesis defenses, and we look forward to watching all of your writing careers continue to grow. I would also like to thank Liz, our assistant coordinator of the festival and grad student studying poetry here at Eastern, for all of her hard work on this event and all events this year. For everyone at home who would like to learn more about these writers, you can visit our website, getlitfestival.org. Remember that these virtual events are all free to access on our YouTube channel, along with dozens of events from previous festivals as well. If you would like to join us next year in 2024, especially all of you talented writers that we have here today, please consider sending us a submission from May 1st to October 1st at getlit.submittable.com. Thank you again for joining us today, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
That was awesome. Hope to see some of you at AWP.
Congratulations.